Monster Hunter Wilds is finally out. I have been eagerly waiting for this game to drop ever since it was announced at the Game Awards 2023. My hype levels were through the roof. I love Monster Hunter, and I love Capcom. So I was extremely excited to see what improvements they could make to the Monster Hunter series this time around. And now, after all this time, Wilds is officially out. Monster Hunter Wilds is part of a long-running series. Monster Hunter. I'm not sure if that was obvious enough. After the success of Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Rise, Monster Hunter has been as popular as ever. World became the renaissance of the series, meaning that World brought on a lot of newer players and skyrocketed the series to what it is today. A lot of people's first Monster Hunter game was World. If you enter a room of 100 Monster Hunter fans, 99 of them will say that their first game was World, while the last guy in the corner says that his first game was Monster Hunter Now. We don't really talk about that guy, so after World, Iceborne, the DLC expansion for World, was released, and then a few years later, Monster Hunter Rise released, and then its expansion, Sunbreak, also released. World, Rise, and their respective expansions are all part of the 5th generation of Monster Hunter. But now, that time has ended. Now we are in the new generation. The 6th generation. With Monster Hunter Wilds. This will be a very small review of the game. As the game just came out, I have not experienced every single little thing that this game has to offer. In fact, I've only barely scratched the surface of the game. The main topics I'll be going over are a non-spoiler talk about the story, differences and improvements between older games, the graphics, and lastly, my overall enjoyment of the game. Well, no more explaining stuff. Let's just get right into talking about Monster Hunter Wilds. I paused a little bit from the game to make this video. I stopped it around the point where the main story ends, so once again, my current knowledge of the game is still very limited and is basically just how I felt about the first couple hours of the game. First, I will be talking about the story. Of course, I will not be talking about any spoilers, and everything you see in this video will most likely be of like the first couple cutscenes of the game, so if you don't want to be spoiled about specific things, you don't have to worry. I will, however, let you know how I feel about the story as a whole. Something to bring up, when I talk about the story, I'm only referring to the end of the main story, where you see the credits for the first time. All of the story takes place in low rank, so I'll be talking about everything before high rank. So, how did I feel about the story? Honestly, at first, I thought the story was super mid, and honestly, relatively boring at some points. It's a Monster Hunter game. Story has never been this series' strong suit. However, they kinda cooked with this one, not gonna lie. I still think that the first half of the story is still pretty mid. It's not horrible, but it doesn't really do anything for me, to be honest. All it really does is just introduce us to the Forbidden Lands, and then to get us, the player, more comfortable with the new game mechanics, like focus attacks and traversing the lands with the Sacreds. While the first half of the story may not be anything special, the second half of the story is actually pretty insane. I swear, the writers of the story took several shots of whiskey and then injected themselves with several drugs and then locked the absolute fuck in and then wrote the rest of the story. The second half of the story ramps up and the story immediately becomes better. I'm gonna be honest. Originally, I wrote a different script regarding the story. I wrote that before I even finished the story, mainly because I thought that the rest of the story would have just stayed the same from beginning to end. Except for like the last 3 fights of the campaign. But man, I was pretty wrong. I'm never doing that ever again. Probably my favorite thing that came out of the story is just the big lore bombs. They drop so much lore in the span of minutes, and it's insane just how much it adds to the already expanding lore. The final boss of the main story is just fucking awesome, and personally I love the lore implications behind it. The lore of the Monster Hunter universe is super interesting, and some of my favorite lore to go into, so seeing a bunch of new stuff added to it is pretty awesome. Another thing I really enjoyed about the story was the characters. The main character of Wilds is basically Nata, the little kid that you picked up in the desert, and the story basically revolves around him. I enjoyed his character at times, and everyone else in the community just seems to absolutely love him. However, sitting on the story for just a little bit longer, he seems like a good character, however, he's just not really suited to be in this kind of game. Nata would be like a 10 out of 10 character if he was in literally any other game except for a Monster Hunter game. The other characters that are pretty important are Alma and Gemma. I'm actually pretty decently surprised with how involved Gemma is with the story. I expected her to just be the smithy and maybe just show up from time to time. But she's in literally like every single major cutscene. It's pretty cool, I'm not gonna lie. Seeing more than just the hunter and the handler interact with the world around them is really nice. Speaking of the handler, Alma. My beloved, I love you. My hunter and Alma are canonically married. Okay, jokes aside, I really do think that Alma is probably one of the best handlers we've gotten in the series so far. I love how involved she is with the story. She just doesn't sit on her ass and just give out quests. She's actually involved, and one of the little touches that I love is that Alma is physically with you in the hunt. Like, I'm fighting a monster, and I just see Alma just chilling in the background. I always get super hyped up when I have to go kill a monster, and Alma says,
Hunter, in order to rescue the Linian and secure the surrounding area, the guild authorizes you to hunt that Nursilla. I'm on it.
It's usually like a top 5 line, and I never get tired of hearing it. I am of the 0.01% of people who actually likes Handler from Monster Hunter World, but Alma just clears her so hard. Overall, I do think that this is probably the best story we've gotten from a Monster Hunter game so far. I wasn't too big of a fan of World's story at all. I can see what they were trying to do, and I do think that it's alright. I don't really like it that much. It's not very good. However, World is when they started to really go into the story aspect of Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter Rise's story was pretty good in my opinion. I love Rise to death. It's probably one of my favorite Monster Hunter games. But oh my god, does this game have some problems with its story. World and Rise walked so Wild could run. In about 5 years' time, I believe that the next game in the series will cook even harder with this story to go along with the gameplay. Speaking of gameplay, the gameplay is fucking amazing. The combat has been the best that it's ever been. I thought that they could not get better with Rise, but I was so fucking wrong. Everything feels amazing. From the weapons to just exploring, everything feels so good to do in the game. As I'm writing this script, I have about 60 hours in the game, but by the time this video comes out, I'm probably gonna have way more. Hell, probably as you're watching this video, I'm probably playing it right now. I've only played a select few weapons so far, mainly the ones that I already know how to play. Greatsword, dual blades, hammer, insight glaive, and sword and shield. I haven't played longsword, switch axe, or charge blade just yet, but I've been hearing really good things about them. Honestly, the changes that they made to all the weapons massively helped them in basically every single way. For example, Greatsword. In past games, Greatsword was a slow, heavy-hitting option with little to no mobility, but in Wilds, they made the Greatsword faster, and now you can move with it while doing your true charge slash, so you aren't committed to one direction if you whiff of the move. Hammer is basically still the same. It's already perfect and it does its job well. The big bonk stick. Sword and shield is also pretty great, and Wilds gave them a few more combo strings. Sword and shield is the most simple weapon in the game, but there's nothing wrong with that. And in my opinion, for the last couple games, I thought that dual blades were poo-poo doo-doo garbage. I thought that they were so bad that I dropped them as my main weapon a long time ago. But starting with Sunbreak, dual blades started getting super good again. And now in Wilds, dual blades are pretty fucking insane, and they're actually really good. I haven't had this much fun playing dual blades since Gen Ult. Insight glaive is my main weapon. And I think in combination with all the new stuff that they introduced in Wilds, I think glaive is absolutely fucking cracked. The new moves are insanely useful, and they made it super easy for you to get all your extracts. Before, in past games, it would take me forever to get all 3 of my extracts. However, in Wilds, I can get all 3 of my extracts basically immediately. It feels so good playing Insight Glaive in Wilds. Using the focus mode and breaking the monster's wounds basically gives the glaive an infinite supply of extract. Most of these weapons got super good because of the focus mode. Focus mode is a new mechanic in Wilds, paired up with another new mechanic of Wilds, the wound mechanic. Monsters will get wounded while you're beating the ever-living shit out of them, as you can see physically on the monster's model. If you can't see where the wound is, you can go into focus mode and the wound will be glowing red. Focus mode is how you can target these wounds and break them, granting you some materials, the monster possibly getting staggered, and you doing a shit ton of damage to the monster. Honestly, this is one of the best systems that they have ever implemented in a game. And I pray to God that this mechanic stays in future games. Plus, they have really cool animations, and I think that you aura farming on the monster should 100% stay. Wilds also changed things from previous games that were pretty big chores. I'm talking about decorations. They made decorations super easy to get, and you could even just directly meld them now. You can fight a high rank Rathalos and get like 8 decorations. It makes the build crafting go significantly faster and streamlines it a lot. It's a really nice change that I love a lot. Another thing they changed is how you traverse the Forbidden Lands. Imagine you having to walk everywhere, like in World. I'd spend more hours in this game walking from point A to point B than actually fighting the monster. Luckily, they took the Palamute system from Rise, and instead, you fight a giant flying bird thingy called a Sacred. Personally, I really do miss the Palamutes, but the Sacreds are pretty fucking cool, and they actually have a in-lore reason for existing, which is a really nice touch. Fighting endgame monsters has never been more fun, and honestly, if I didn't have to go to sleep, have to go to work, or have to do other real-life stuff, I would probably be HR 300 by now. I thought Rise was by far the most fun monster in the game to play, and I still kind of believe that, just because I really liked the switch skills and the wire bug movements. I thought those were really fun and cool. And honestly, I do kind of miss wire bugs just a little bit, but damn, does Wild feel good to play. I do, however, have some problems with other gameplay mechanics of Wilds. They don't really dampen the quality of the game too much, but it does kind of bug me a little bit. First off, the performance. I play on PS5, so to be honest, I have not really experienced too much performance issues. Every once in a while I get like little funny glitches where like everybody just T-poses for a second, and then sometimes the game dips in quality just a tiny bit, but then immediately fixes itself. I heard that PC has significantly worse issues to the point where people can't even play the game. Another thing that is pretty annoying is just overall the server side of the game. Recently, I did a quest with my friend, and holy shit, I could not play the game at all. I got kicked from the lobby immediately, and then I had to rejoin. And then when I did rejoin, the monster was just teleporting everywhere, and I was like several seconds behind from everybody else. I am not sure if that's just a server issue or a me issue. With every single other multiplayer game, I'm fine. But ever since Wilds came out, my connection has just been absolutely abysmal. Another issue with the game that a lot of people seem to have a problem with is just trying to play with people in general. You need to go through menu after menu after menu just to join somebody's lobby. And then you need to get into a link party, and then afterwards you need to go to your smoking hot handler and then accept the quest. And then you can fight the monster. If you don't get kicked because you have dog shit internet, that is. It's needlessly complicated, and Rise did the system perfectly. I do not know why they just didn't use that system. In that system, you make a lobby, you give your friend a 4-digit code. Spoiler alert, it's always 6969. And then boom, you could just play together almost instantly. I'm aware that Wilds and Rise were made by different teams, but the Wilds team could have just easily just been like, hot damn, that's pretty simple, let's use that instead. I do, however, think that it's not a sin against humanity like most people have said. It's very tedious and a little annoying, but that's all it really is. World had a similar system, and it was infinitely worse. I do not care what anyone says. Monster Hunter World probably had the worst multiplayer experience in the entire series, and it's not even close. My last problem with the game has to do with the story and how it's handled. In my honest opinion, there is way too much hand-holding. I'm not saying it should be like older games where you get told fucking nothing and then just thrown into the world and you gotta figure it out yourself, but Jesus Christ, man, this is way too much in my opinion. Like, the first 10 hours of the game is just hand-holding. This is the veteran in me talking, but I already know how to do all this shit. Why do I not have the option to skip it? At one point, Gemma just straight up gives you materials to level up your weapons and armor. Luckily, it's not by much, but I wanted to go out and get those materials for myself. I don't want freebies, I want to earn it. Luckily, they stopped doing that somewhat early on, but it still kind of bothers me a little bit. I understand that the developers want to ease new players into the whole system. There's nothing wrong with wanting to do that. However, I just feel like there are better ways of doing it. Overall though, Wilds does hit the nail on the head with a lot of other stuff. Monster Hunter Wilds is not a perfect game. It still has some problems that have still plagued the entire series. These problems cannot be fixed that easily, sadly. However, there were several problems that they did fix. World was not perfect. Far from it. Rise was not perfect. Far from it. However, I believe that the Monster Hunter Wilds team took what they did for Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Rise and smashed it together. Monster Hunter Wilds is a combination of what made World good and what made Rise good, and then added even more things to make the most enjoyable experience so far. Many outside people looking to get into the series is probably wondering one thing: is Wilds a good entry point into the series? At this point in time, yeah, I'd say so. I believe that Monster Hunter Wilds is probably the best game to start as your first Monster Hunter game. Monster Hunter before was like super notorious for just how hard it was to get into, but now it's never been easier. I give Monster Hunter Wilds a 9 out of 10. I love Monster Hunter. If you were to ask me what is my favorite game of the 3 that was mentioned in this video, Monster Hunter World, Monster Hunter Rise, or Monster Hunter Wilds, what would it be? The answer is so incredibly simple to see. It's Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, baby!